Okay, we are live from Token 2049 here with the Renaissance man, Charles Hoskinson. Charles, it's been about a year
Yeah.
since we last spoke. How you
Yeah.
been?
A little tired getting it done. I've been all around the world. I was in Argentina, Brazil, Guatemala. I was in freaking Japan, here, Vegas. It's been a long haul in the last 5 weeks.
Quite the globetrotter.
Yeah.
Charles, I want to dive right into it.
Yes, sir.
One of the things you told me last time was that you were homeschooled. And I found that very interesting. You said that it had an extremely positive impact on you. You said it's the single best thing that you can do for your kids, and you highlighted the indoctrination factory that is the education system. You said, and I quote, "The reason I am what I am today and I'm able to do what I do is because I never grew up with somebody telling me that I can't." And I think a lot of young people in my age group, millennials, Gen Zs, they feel like they haven't made much of an impact on the world, and they feel like they don't really have much direction. They go through K through 12, they graduate, they get a job, and life kind of feels, I don't want to make this for everyone, but generally speaking, pointless, and you're
Right.
kind of a cog in the machine. So you also made a point about how it's never been a better time to be homeschooled. I'd push back and say that a lot of Americans don't have the resources to homeschool their kids. So what I would like to see is a complete restructuring of our educational system. So can you dive into what you believe is broken about the bureaucracy of academia, what you think needs to change, and how we take those first steps?
Well, this is a fun question. It's a welcome one, though. Education's a deep passion of mine. And first, with respect to homeschooling, it was the dominant model of education until the 19th century, and then the education industrial complex kind of got started. And it was a good thing from a certain lens and perspective, but it's important to understand that the reason this complex was created was to basically staff a bureaucracy and also to deal with the consequences of the Industrial Revolution. So it really wasn't the intention to create a free-thinking society of creative people that are going to go out and change the world. The intention was to create cogs in a giant machine. So you kind of have to standardize everybody and teach everybody the same way, treat everybody the same way, and say you must know skills X, Y, and Z because they will make you a better employee for the capital class. The rich people had always had a different education system, a classic liberal arts education. You have like the 7 fields of liberal arts, and they'd read the great books and go learn Latin and Greek, and there is very philosophical, and you learn rhetoric, you learn argumentation and logic and mathematics, and none of these things had any direct or material connection to your productive output as a person, but they were intended for a philosophy class of basically an aristocracy to rule people, to run things and decide where should humanity go, or what should religion look like. So the 20th century was the first time we started trying to hybridize these things in a certain way, especially at the college level, where we said, hey, we will teach you a little bit about the great books, and we will teach you a little bit about philosophy and literature, but then after you're done with that, go back to being a working class serf. The problem with K through 12 education is that it has 3 big sins to it. One, it's out of date. Look at how rapid technology has been evolving. So when I was growing up in Hawaii, we didn't even have the internet. It was just getting started, and you get it at libraries or universities or something, but it was nowhere near even any notion of what we have today. We couldn't conceive of it. We didn't have cell phones. We had bricks, There was no smartphone or this type of concept. We didn't have generative AI, all these types of things. So education was very organized in a certain lens and perspective, and it's not reactive to the fact that these devices now exist. It's still teaching people much the same way people were taught in 1990 or 2000. So the rate of innovation is very low. Second, the purpose of mainstream K through 12 education in America is mostly bureaucratic. It serves the teachers' unions. It has no outcome-oriented or student-centered viewpoint, and much case in point, when Green Dot Charter Schools demonstrated how remarkable of an innovation they made, people in California didn't even want to entertain this model because they said, well, you're delivering the product at a lower cost than what we have. If we entertain this, we'll get our budget cut. They say, well, look at all the great outcomes we have. How many people are going to college and trade school and not getting pregnant and not going to prison? So, yeah, but you're spending less money, and if we do this, we don't want to get salaries cut or reduce the size of the bureaucracy. So that's just an extraordinary thing. Another case in point is just look at the rise of MOOCs, massive open online courses, and all the amazing content that's now online and how curated that content is and how you can literally learn any topic from not just a good teacher, but literally the person who's like the world expert in that for free. So shouldn't the cost of education be going down year by year and the quality going up year by year? But instead it actually continues to deteriorate the quality of education and the cost continues to go up. It means you have a bureaucracy for the sake of serving a bureaucracy. The other thing is also in a standardized system, you cannot reward creativity or individualism because you don't have the resources to treat everybody special. When you're an aristocrat, you hire the Greek scholar to teach your kids Greek. You hire bespoke, customized education, and you emphasize the growth and development of the person. When you're a standardized system, every single person is a cog in a machine. So if you witness people who are doing exceptional, extraordinary things, but they're unorthodox, you pound them down in that type of a system. You can't allow them to grow in that type of a system. And you medicate them. You give them Ritalin and these types of things. And you say, shut up and get to your desk. So what ends up happening is all the very creative people, they get hopeless in a system like that. And they just start being taught that they can't. You also don't want to tell people that they can go and do exceptional things because that doesn't make good workers in a certain respect. You just tell them to get a job. And you see this a lot when people say when they go to college, what do you do? I study philosophy. You'll never be employed. Welcome to Starbucks. And things like, okay, well, all the philosophy I studied, all the stuff I took when I was at university, all of this has immeasurably benefited my career in the cryptocurrency space. I love poetry. And lo and behold, we honor Percy Shelley, who wrote Ozymandias and the Cardano Roadmap, and Voltaire is one of the eras that I have. It worked its way in, and there's inspiration there. I couldn't possibly have known at the time that I was reading this stuff that it would work its way into a cryptocurrency. We'd be talking about it in Singapore at the Marina Bay Sands. But that enculturated and enriched me as a person. And unfortunately, if you have an education system that's so doggedly connected to a deterministic output of how much money will you make or what type of job will you get, there's nothing there. The other side of being homeschooled is it teaches you to be a self-learner. And that's, I think, the cardinal sin of the traditional education system is it has this notion of completion to it. You get your degree, then you're done, and you'll never open a textbook again, never read a book again. You're finished. You have some piece of paper on the wall. Well, when is art done? Learning is a lifelong endeavor. Every single day you have to learn new things. You have to think about the world differently. You have to take beliefs and things that you thought were true and challenge them and evolve and grow from them. And if you have this completionist mindset that I finished the module, check the box, then you stop doing the lifelong learning thing, and then you miss so much stuff as a direct consequence for it. So I believe homeschooling is definitely a very valuable thing if you have the time and the resources, and I'd argue that more people do than they realize, because you can endow your children with so much more love and care and a much more balanced and holistic education. And also, you can take the time to make them understand that they're special and that they matter. It really is, as a kid, a wonderful thing that knowing that somebody took the time to treat you and care for you and grow you and want you to be somebody exceptional in life. You just don't get that same appeal when you're dealing with a giant, uncaring bureaucracy that really is all there just about to preserve and protect the system rather than you.
So you don't think that it's possible to shift the paradigm at scale and that homeschooling is only available for people that are able to put in the time and have the resources as well?
I think it can be, but it does require us to have a broader conversation about the totality of bureaucracy. Like the national debt in the United States is a great example of this. $35 trillion. It's actually not that hard to deal with it. All you would do is you would just cut the U.S. budget by 5% per year within 14 years, cut in half. So at some point, you'll actually make more than you spend, And is it inconceivable in a time where productivity has tripled in 20 years and that so much innovation's occurred that we can cut the federal bureaucracy by 5% per year? And the fact that that's not only a possible conversation, it's impossible. The budget continues to grow at 7% per year. We are laden with institutions whose sole purpose is to preserve and protect the institution. And no one is allowed to say no, and no one is allowed to cut the budget. That's why you have 16 intelligence agencies. That's why we have this gigantic education and military industrial complex. That's why healthcare costs $4 trillion a year in the United States. No one can say no, no one can consolidate. So if you're going to actually change the education paradigm, you have to change the culture and actually say, you know what, we need to try alternative things. I was a big fan of charter schools and voucher systems. Say, okay, well, maybe you let the parents make that decision, and they can get a voucher for homeschooling their kids or a voucher for going to a charter school. And this is viciously opposed by the public education system and the bureaucracy and the teachers' unions, apparently giving a parent the choice of where their child is educated and how their child is educated is bad for the child. It's just so insane and patronizingly stupid. But unfortunately, that's the reality we live in. And it's also racist. Because if you're in a minority community and poor, and living in a broken place, let's say inner city Detroit or in the Bronx or something in a bad area, given a voucher means that your kids can go to a significantly better school somewhere else. Their chance, the lived experience they're going to have by being able to do that, it will change their lives. It's the difference between a generational, being crime and drugs and problems to they are Supreme Court justice, or a doctor or something like that. It literally would change your lives. And to say we are going to stop you from being able to do that because we want to protect our budgets and our salaries, that's a crime. That's absolutely a crime. And the fact that this government gets away with it is just an indication the purpose of the government is to serve the government's needs. Mm-hmm. It's not the will of the people. Being on the outside looking on in, it's just blatantly obvious to me that that's the case. If I was a member of that system, maybe I would have a different opinion in the matter. But there's a reason I'm a cryptocurrency entrepreneur. There's a reason I'm a libertarian. There's a reason why I'm a student of history, because I take the time to kind of study things and dissect them and break them apart and ask, is there a better way of doing this? And I'm not always right, but at the very least, the question should be asked because the product is not good. No one is happy. It's getting worse. It's getting more expensive, and it's leading to a lost generation. As you mentioned, so many kids today, they graduate and they go back to home with the parents, and they have no place or purpose. They don't feel any rites of passage. They have no motivation. There's no directionality in the life. And they wake up at 30 years old, addicted to porn, overweight, sitting in their house and watching anime in their underwear. I mean, it's like this is the generation we have right now. And then people criticize them. They say, "You kids, shave your hair and get back to damn work." But they say, "What's the point? The economic system is rigged." Yeah. And there's a bit of truth, a very uncomfortable truth. Another consequence of the hyper-government spending is inflation. When my grandfather graduated from high school, served in the Marine Corps in 1948 to 1952. And when he got out of Korea, he came back. He bought his first home for about $8,000.
Yep.
Okay, and he raised 7 kids on a lineman's salary, and his wife stayed home. They had 2 cars. Nowadays, you can go and get a master's degree. You can marry someone with a master's degree. You can't afford a car. You can't afford an apartment. You can barely scrape by. Never going to own a house. And that's because inflation has destroyed the money. So if you're 30 years old and you're sitting at home and you have no purpose and everything, they say, "Oh, you should work harder." I say, "What's the point? No matter how hard I work, the economic system is rigged against me." And until we as a society take a step back and say, well, there's more truth in that than we'd like to admit, we're not going to make any progress. And this generation is facing much more significant problems than the prior generations in that dimension.
I want to talk about the antidote to that, and I know that's one of your missions with Cardano, but I do want to take a step back. You highlighted how homeschooling can deepen your relationship with your parents, or you alluded to that, and your parents are your first role models. So I can only imagine if it's done right, then it's a magical thing. What was your relationship like with your parents?
Oh, it was quite good. My dad's a doctor, and my mom is a stay-at-home mom, and Before that, she was a respiratory therapist. That's how she met my dad. And, he's an internist. And it wasn't a affluent childhood. We were a middle-class family, and my dad is very fiscally conservative. So we lived in a modest home, drove modest cars, and, everybody had to work for what they have. And, what's nice about having a father who's a physician is that the entire raison d'etre of his existence is to heal people and help people. So he always had a very humanitarian aspect on things. He's the kind of guy that would spend hours after hours going and doing the extra effort. And I remember patient after patient that would come in and they have some serious medical problem, and a lot of doctors, they put in the bare minimum and they don't really care too much, especially as they get older and the system is so bureaucratic. But he'd actually take the time to call specialists and take the time to actually go through the charts and read it uncompensated, just to make sure that person is okay and save their life. And so from a very early age, I felt that. And it's the same for my mother. My mother's a fighter. She's an Italian woman. She mentioned my grandfather on her side was the Marine. And, large Italian family, you got to be tough. It's, especially New York and Florida and the age that she grew up in. So my mom is a firebrand, and she never backed down from a fight and caused a few fights herself. And so I learned from an early age too on that side. If you want something, you can't be passive. You have to have some sharp elbows and just go and get it. And also if there's an injustice, you got to fight for it. And so that's the thing I learned from my mother is the injustice component of it. There's so many of them in the world, and so from a very early age, I developed a bit of a firebrand attitude, and I didn't like things that weren't fair. It's just wrong when things happen. It bothers me deeply that sometimes people develop cynicism and apathy. If you see a problem, don't let it slide. Solve the problem, or at least mentally note it. And when you have an opportunity to discuss it and figure it out. The reason why society falls apart is indifference, not evil. The wholesale indifference of millions of people is what allows evil to exist. If people are not indifferent, then and they actually have some activism in their bones, they'll go and get it done. And that's what I learned from her, at a very early age. And I kept that fighting spirit in every step of the way, being in the cryptocurrency space or working the Ron Paul campaign or other things like that. I carried that with me, and it's been immeasurably valuable to combine those two things.
Are you worried about how divided the U.S. currently is politically?
Yeah, it's a serious problem, and the issue is the U.S. is divided because I'd say of three core root causes. One, the economic system is falling apart. Mm-hmm. Our money is not sound, and we know it. And each generation it's getting harder and harder, and the divide between the rich and the poor is rather significant. And there's no end in sight for that. Two, our institutions have been hollowed from the inside out, and they've become perverse simulacra of what they used to be. We used to look up to the CDC and the FBI and the DOJ and the U.S. military and these things. Now, the best you can say is at least they didn't fuck up today. And usually they do fuck up. It's pretty horrible when you see it. COVID was just a great example of it. Before COVID, somebody worked for the CDC or NIH, you say, oh, these are great people. They wear the bunny suits and fight Ebola, and wow, that's so brave. And after COVID, they're like, get away from me, you child murdering vaccine monger. A lot of people are pretty upset with them. And there's this shut up and take your pills attitude that these guys have. And then the third thing is that there's competing philosophies inside the United States. There's the dying legacy philosophy of America is a shining city on a hill, kind of the Ronald Reagan view of it that says, hey, we're the good guys, and America always a shining beacon to help guide the world, and capitalism and the American way of life is the best we've ever invented. And you have this wokeism that's formed, and it's very socialist, communist at its core, and it has communist roots. If you read Douglas Murray's book, Madness of the Crowds, and basically it says America is systemically racist, the true founding of the nation, 1619, when the first slaves came over. The goal is to destroy the patriarchy and get rid of the domination of the evil white males, and economic justice and social justice and climate justice and this justice and, fruit justice. I mean, they'll put a justice in front of everything at this point. Well, how do you get along when you have radically different philosophies of the world? Because these philosophies don't just guide your way of life. They help you interpret the world around you. So it's like a Rorschach's test. If something happens, and if you have philosophy A and philosophy B, same event, same set of facts, have radically different views of that same event and those facts. A great example would be the Trump assassination attempt. It happens, and if people are politically left, they viewed it almost immediately with suspicion or downplayed it. Yeah. And they said, "Oh,
it was
well,
staged.
It was staged, or it was the teleprompter cut them, and it wasn't very serious." It's like 2 people died, and literally the guy was just a head tilt away from being in a pine box that day. But the hatred is so strong, and the philosophy is so strong, it doesn't penetrate. And it's the same with the other side. When you come from America as a shining beacon on a hill, it makes you blind to the fact that we as a nation have and continue to do some pretty terrible things, and won't litigate the past, but there's a long line of history of bad things that have happened in the American story, and we just seem to be myopic. Like the war in Iraq is the most recent and probably one of the worst examples in modern history. About 1.5 million people died, depending upon how you count that, on a lie. We said weapons of mass destruction wasn't the case. A lot of these people were civilians. The kids had nothing to do with any of this stuff, and they're dead. And we'd just say, "Oh, well, we just have to move on." Back when I was growing up, you kill 1.5 million people, like you're on the same list as Hitler and Pol Pot and these other guys. But apparently it's not a problem, and it's okay. So both of these philosophies, I'd argue, are not fit for purpose, and they also don't acknowledge the fact that we live in a different social contract. We have hyperconnectivity, you have AI, you have all these new things that are coming, and the very notions of reality are being chipped away. It's hard to know what's real anymore. It's hard to know if things even happened anymore.
Right.
When you see a picture or a video, you don't know. And also, most of what we think and feel is being manipulated by algorithms,
right,
by social media, right? So if you have a thought, even though you think you have free will, it's probably composed of 1,000 algorithms working together that steered that thought in that particular direction. So if you know subconsciously that reality is malleable, objectivity is gone, and that what you're thinking and feeling is not your own thoughts, it's very difficult to find grounding. And that's why so many people are tuning out and becoming cynical and shutting off. So what happens? How do you fix that? How you fix that is you have to have a counter philosophy. So this is why you see people starting to create new religions. You see people trying to create new philosophies, like singularityism. You have Ray Kurzweil and these other guys. They say singularity is near. What are they really saying under the hood? Well, they're saying we're going to create a God. They're saying we're going to go ahead and create some AI that knows everything. It's read every textbook. It's read every religious text. It knows every human. It's interacted with billions of humans at the same time. And then once we create it, if we align it properly, and it's paternal and it wants to help us, then you can start asking it questions like, what's the ideal political system? What's the ideal education system? Who's the most qualified person to be leader? What human rights are universal versus subjective? Who's bad and who's good? And how do we punish bad people? What should we do? Should we rehabilitate them or throw them away? What's the optimal resource allocation in the world? These types of things. So it's like a deus ex machina. And if it's a supreme intelligence, whatever answer it gives you probably is considerably better than the answers that a human being could. So that starts feeling like a religion in a certain respect. It's like divine command theory. God will tell you what to do. Then you have wokeism. It's become its own religion. And there's dozens of other things that have become religions now. And, Yuval Harari writes about this in Homo Deus. So that is a competition of ideas. We saw this in the Roman Empire right at the turn of the millennia. When Jesus was around, he wasn't the only person claiming to be the Son of God and a Savior. There's probably 300 to 400 people that were kind of like Jesus. And there was a lot of these upstart monotheistic cults that were forming. And even within polytheism, they had these mystery cults that existed, and Gnosticism existed, and so forth. And the Roman Empire was dealing with that. At the same time, the empire was trying to change polytheism to create a pantheon where the emperor kind of sat at the center of it, and they were using religion as a mechanism of control over the people. So you had new polytheism, old polytheism, flavors of polytheism, and then many different flavors of monotheism. And then eventually Christianity won out over a 300-year philosophical battle, and it was fundamentally incompatible with the way that the Roman Empire operated. So it was one of the contributing factors to the collapse of the Roman Empire. And the same for the political systems in the Middle East. Pre-8th century, there's no Islam, and they had a very different way of going about the world, and then Islam sweeps through, and then you kind of unified an entire view of a large chunk of the world. So philosophies come and go, and when they do, they have profound social change. They change your governance structure, they change your outlook on things, they change human rights, they change your rights structures. The Enlightenment is another example of that. And we're going through that right now, and typically the things are backed by some form of change of trade and communication and social progress. You get Christianity when you have a Roman Empire, because you suddenly have unified the world. You have standardization in the roads, standardized languages, people could travel great distances. It was unheard of in the Bronze Age for somebody to go from Spain to Syria. But that was a common thing that happened because it was one unified empire there. What does that mean? It means the ideas of Syria are now in Spain, and the ideas of Spain are now in Syria. And as a direct consequence of that, a small upstart religion in Israel could then spread like wildfire throughout the entire empire, influence people and change things. And it also, these new religions typically deal with the problems of the time. When you have an empire where the vast majority of people are either slaves or deeply poor, and human life isn't terribly valued, it's pretty exciting to have this philosophy come by and say, you're all children of God. And if you believe in the Savior, no matter if you're a king or a slave, you all get to go to the gates of heaven. That's pretty good. Mars isn't giving this to you. Jupiter's not giving this to you. It's pretty special. So when you look at today, it's like these new philosophies that are coming, they give you answers of what do we deal with when humans are no longer the most intelligent species in the world? Or what do we deal with when the environment's not where we need to be, or we have overpopulation, or the economies collapse, or perhaps a world war breaks out, or something like that. They give you kind of a new hope, a new way of looking at the world and our rights within it. And then you create social order and stability once those new philosophies come. So I do believe over the next 10 or 20 years, it's going to be the largest social change that has ever occurred in human history. And I also believe that all the social contracts are going to change. And I also believe that we're going to have to come to terms with the belief systems of the past. And we're going to have to basically figure out what they mean, which is why I'm so hopeful about blockchain and cryptocurrency, because at their core, those are talking about the economic, political, and social systems. And they're reminding us that as we change things, don't leave people behind. Never leave people behind. In crypto, everybody's equal. It doesn't matter if I'm the founder of Cardano. I use it the same way all the people down there use it. It doesn't matter that Vitalik's the founder of Ethereum. He uses Ethereum the same way everybody down there uses it. That's never been the case with economic systems. Bill Gates gets special privileges in capitalism, as do I, because we're part of the billionaire class. So normally, and everybody just accepts that. They're like, yeah, of course, you guys are rich, so you get the special shit. Political leaders, they get a two-tiered justice system. If you're a king or a dictator, it's like try to get in a fight with like the royal family in Abu Dhabi, like sue them and see how respectful the courts are going to be of that. There's no rule of law in that, and you just kind of accept. You're like, well, yeah, it is kind of their country. They don't, it's like they are the leaders, so they probably have a different justice system for them. Blockchain doesn't care about that stuff. So that's pretty magical from a certain dimension, a certain perspective. And if you apply that at every single level, your social systems, your economic system, your political systems, what they do is they give you a superpower, and that's trust. And I don't think people fully understand how profoundly powerful trust is to every single thing we do. So here's an elucidating example. It really helps people ground themselves in it. So imagine you live next door to somebody. You own some land, they own some land. You want to buy part of his land. Imagine you really like your neighbor, you get along with him, you grew up with him, you trust each other implicitly. You come by and say, I'm going to buy that 50 acres for $100,000, rah, rah, rah. You shake hands on it. Okay, you're starting to do the deal. Problem comes up in the contract. You trust each other. Hey, can we fix that? Yeah, no problem at all. You sign it and then you go to the bar. Great. Deal closes, you got the land. Huzzah. Now let's say you don't trust each other. Okay, so what does that transaction look like? You go to buy the land. You have a lawyer. He has a lawyer. You haggle and haggle. You start the deal. Contractual issue comes up. He disagrees because he doesn't trust you. You disagree because you don't trust us. You sue each other. 9 months in court. $200,000 in legal fees. Eventually it settles, you win. Okay, you get the land. You spent $250,000 for that land instead of $100,000. You spent years of litigation, got the same land. You know, so you had the same outcome. So trust is the lubricant to fix all these types of things. The same for hospitals. How does a hospital work if you don't have any trust in the institution? You come in, you say, I'm sorry, man, we got to do surgery on you. I don't trust these guys. If I do this, they'll kill me on the operating room table. What compels you to think it's a good idea to go on a table, let somebody knock you out with drugs, cut into your body and take something out? You trust them. You trust that the diagnosis is right. You trust that their skills are right. You trust the hospital is clean and safe. You trust so many parts of that system. If any one of those parts breaks down, will you do the surgery? Probably not, even if it's in your best interest. Every dimension of life requires some notion of trust. What blockchain systems do is they reintroduce trust at a global scale for everybody. What that means is we can coordinate at a much larger scale, and we also can regulate at a much larger scale. Look at AI regulation. I don't feel super comfortable that frickin' Google and Microsoft and Sam Altman, these other guys, have absolute say in whether ChatGPT and Gemini and other things can answer a question or not. I really don't, man.
Me neither.
And I'll give you a great example. I did a fireside chat with Robert Kennedy, and a few days before I was going to interview him at Rare Evo, I was going and doing some diligence on speeches that he made, and I knew that he spoke at Bitcoin 2024. I didn't have time to watch his speech. So normally what I do is I take the YouTube videos, I go to Gemini, post them and say, can you summarize the video for me? So it gives me, because YouTube and Gemini are interconnected to each other. So almost always it gives me great summaries. So I post Robert Kennedy's video. It starts answering and giving a summary, and then it stops and says, I'm sorry, I can't summarize this video for you. Tried it 3 times, did it each time. Then I took a speech from Kamala Harris, I put it in, it could summarize it for me. And I'm just thinking, my God, these tools are so partisan now, and they're so biased now, and they follow a particular view of the world. This is a public good. Generative AI is something that's going to change the arc of the human race. Why do we let 5 or 10 or 15 people make a decision what that should look like? Blockchain technology restores trust in this setup. Because what does it do? It says, okay, regulating AI is kind of like regulating a blockchain. So it's kind of like on-chain governance for a blockchain. It's not like a DAO. Okay, so you bring all the people together and you take the totality of all the different viewpoints, and then that creates kind of a regulatory framework to train the AI through. So I think there's amazing tools, to say, for synthetic biology with like gain-of-function research, or the use of other exponential technologies like quantum computing and so forth. These are very, very powerful things. And like nuclear weapons, if we don't use them correctly, they can create catastrophic harm to society as a whole. So if you use these things the right way, they can create catastrophic, they can create a wondrous abundance for humanity as a whole and really help humanity out. And they're neutral. So there's no preconceived guarantee that it's going to go positive or negative. You have to actually invest in it. So getting trust back into the equation then allows you to regulate at a scale we've never seen and collaborate at a scale we've never seen. And that's what's going to solve these problems that are before us. It's a great opportunity, but God, it's a tremendous challenge. And there's no guarantee that everything is going to work its way out. There's been plenty of eras in human history where we've descended into the chaos of the Dark Ages.
Who do you think wins the election, and how important do you think the outcome is for the future of our industry and the future of the country?
You know, I'm just saddened by the fact that every 4 years it's the most important election of our lifetime, according to the people. And we have this theater that somehow if the virtuous great person wins, it'll overcome the evil dark demon. And the reality is they're both deeply flawed people. Harris has absolutely no business being a presidential candidate. Yeah, she didn't earn it by any sense of the word. Being the nominee of a major party means that you fought hard. You ran years of campaigns. You've been vetted at a very significant level. You've done thousands of press conferences. You've had to go through some very difficult rites of passage. And you killed everybody else. I mean, whether you like Trump or not, look at 2016. He went and crushed Bush. He crushed Marco Rubio. He crushed Ted Cruz.
Wiped the floor with all of them.
Yeah, wiped the floor with all these guys. He took them down. And that's what the presidential politics is. The same for Ronald Reagan. He was the dark horse in 1980. They said he was too old, he was too extreme. crushed George Bush, he crushed the rest of the guys. Same for Jimmy Carter in 1976. So there is a rite of passage there that she never went through, which means we don't even know who she is. We don't know her politics. We don't know what she believes in. We don't know if she's just a continuity of Biden or her own person. And she's running as the not Trump option on the ballot. So when you elect her, then you, at some point, maybe kind of sort of will actually figure out what she stands for and if we like it or not like it. But it's almost like an arranged marriage. You just show up, there's a wife there, and you're like, okay, happily ever after. You know, best of luck, everybody. Do you like stuff? And then on the Trump side, I think he's too old, he's too disconnected, and he's not adequately prepared for the governance challenges that are before us in 2024. The other thing is he's too divisive. To be the president of the United States of America, you got to bring people together. You got to heal people. You can't say my job is to rule 45% and then crush the other 55% somehow. And he has time and again failed every test of leadership, the most recent of which is after the assassination attempt, the first one. What could have happened there is he said time for unity, picked a unifying vice president, had a unifying speech at the Republican National Convention. But he let his nature get in the way. He picked J.D. Vance as his VP. He gave for the first half of his speech a unity speech and then just regressed into riffing again because he just can't get beyond it. And now he's talking about like Haitian migrants eating dogs.
Cats.
Cats. They're eating the cats.
I think you said both of them,
They're
actually.
eating
The dogs.
You know, we got a nice remix for the whole thing.
Yes.
And when you see this stuff, you say like, this is not the great unifier.
Dude.
We have nothing to fear but fear itself. You know, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. You know, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. They're eating the cats.
Right?
It's like one of these things is not like the other.
Oh, the
you know,
contrast.
Sesame Street for a frickin' win. It's crazy. So when you see stuff like that, you say, this has never been a more important time for our country to unify, to overcome that which divides us, and to have frank conversations about how these systems have failed us. And we have to choose between dementia and demented, that was the Biden, or absent and demented, you know, that's Harris and Trump. And let's say he gets elected, it's going to be 4 years of just rage with the left. Democrats have made him into literal orange Hitler, and so they can't accept that any single thing he's done is good. The Abraham Accords doesn't matter. Getting NATO to pay its fair share doesn't matter. Preventing nuclear war with North Korea, we should have nuked him. You know, maybe getting peace between Russia and Ukraine. No, that's not possible. He's evil. Every dimension is always bad. So we'll be looking forward to 4 years of just more impeachments, more investigations, 100% negative coverage on the media, and because he can't help himself, 4 years of counterpunching, getting crazier and crazier and crazier, and now it's okay to weaponize the government against people. They did it against Trump, now he can do it against his political opponents. So a lot of people are going to get arrested during those 4 years. If Harris gets elected, it promotes the tone deafness that the Democrats have. They've been in charge for 12 of the last 16 years, and they like to pretend like every single problem that's ever occurred is the Republicans' fault. Sorry, they own the lion's share of the national debt. They own the foreign policy. They own the divisions in society. They have put a woke agenda on the world that has been insanely divisive, you know, and they don't acknowledge that. And they say, shut up and get in the corner, accept it, take your vaccine, accept this, and they won't concede a single point. So if she wins the election, they'll say this is a justification for what we've done. You know, the lack of a red wave in 2022 said that the COVID policies, the lockdown policies are okay. So they'll do it again the minute another pandemic comes and go and destroy more lives and these types of things. So that's not good for America either, to elect basically a person you have no idea what she believes in, and her only qualification is not Trump, and also to continue a philosophy which has been catastrophic in terms of dividing America and bringing people down and just being so challenging. And so no matter who wins, it's not an ideal outcome for the United States.
Sure.
As a business leader in the cryptocurrency community, obviously Trump is more pro-crypto. He just did a Bitcoin transaction, bought something. His son's launching a DeFi platform. It would be intellectually dishonest. And again, you have to be a radical partisan to say that Trump is somehow just transactional in the dimension that he doesn't care about crypto at all. He knows how to make money from crypto. So we all know that he's going to push for pro-crypto legislation. He will pardon Ross Ulbricht. There's no political downside for him to embrace these types of things and get them done, especially given that he can create a permanent political base with it. Now, if the winds and fortunes change, because Trump is so transactional, I do believe that he would change his opinion. But I think he could actually get something done there. Harris had every opportunity to give us a mea culpa and fire Gary Gensler and stop the war on crypto. She's in office right now. She likes to pretend like she's not, but for 4 years they've been running the show, so it's pretty easy for them to change course, right? Become pro-crypto. She's decided not to do that. So I don't have any illusions or beliefs that she's going to be pro-crypto. So it's just a shame, and I'm saddened. America is a magical place. There's so many incredible people. It's just a nation that is remarkable. And I've been to 40 plus states. I've met great business leaders. I've met people who are farmers and ranchers. I live in Wyoming. I got a bison ranch there, 11,000 acres.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, and my neighbors are some of the toughest people you'll ever meet. And they're pretty special people. You know, they fought in wars, went back and raised cattle. You know, and they are incredible people. And in a nation of such incredible people who have worked so hard, to have these two choices is an indication that the system is deeply sick.
I am so grateful for what this country has done for my family, first-generation immigrants, and the opportunities it's given me, and I want it to continue upwards and onwards in the right direction. We are running out of time, and I'm told one more question. We didn't even talk about the geeky stuff. We didn't talk about Cardano. We didn't talk about why you said Bitcoin's a cult and you don't see how it's going to survive. We didn't talk about why Vitalik doesn't like the governance model and why the L2 model is broken. And I think that, you know, Charles, I'm going to bundle this because anytime I talk to you, I feel like we can go into so many different tangents. But you highlighted that blockchain and crypto is an antidote to a lot of systems that are currently inefficient. Why does it have to be a zero? Why does it have to be a zero-sum game, right? Why can't Bitcoin survive? Why can't the EVM ecosystem as a first-mover advantage and all it's done? Why can't that survive? And then why can't Cardano with its multiple pillars that we talked about last time? And I wanted to dive into Midnight, and we didn't get to do that. But why can't these blockchain systems all live alongside each other symbiotically and change the world together?
Well, they certainly could. It's just certain cultures are causing problems. I am reactive to Bitcoin, not proactive to Bitcoin. I grew up in the first generation, so 2010, so I was around in the very early days, and I consider myself a Bitcoiner, and I don't think I ever stopped being a Bitcoiner. But it is patently offensive when Bitcoin maximalists say anybody who builds an altcoin is a criminal.
I hate that they do. Why do they do that?
And so if they stop doing that, then we have no problem.
Right.
Instead they keep doing it, and then they go to politicians and say pass legislation to outlaw altcoins and make them all securities. They cheer on Gary Gensler attacking the altcoin space. This is the kind of stuff, and somebody has to hold them accountable.
Right.
And I punch the Bitcoiners because I say stop doing this, and then they punch back and they say you're a shitcoiner and this and that. And there needs to be a bit more courage in our industry. It's totally okay to say we have technological and commercial and philosophical differences about governance, about the nature of these systems. It's not okay to say the people who compete with me are evil, they're criminals, and they should be in prison.
I hate it.
It's not okay.
No.
And whenever we see that, people need to have courage and stand up. They don't do it because they're afraid to get the blowback from the Bitcoin maximalists. But they're not your friends. They will never be your friends. Just because they're not actively pouring oil on you today doesn't mean they're not going to do it tomorrow. There's a toxicity there which is very problematic. I'll give a great example of it. When Robert Kennedy came for our fireside chat, he had spoken at Bitcoin 2024 just before, and then all these maximalists came out. If you read the comments section, but they said, "Oh, now I can't vote for Kennedy. He endorses shitcoiners and these things." You have a 70-year-old man trying to embrace an industry, trying to promote pro-crypto legislation. And they're basically saying that you have to make a choice. You're either Team Orange or you're not. And if you're not, you're evil and you're a criminal or you're misguided or you're a scammer. it's an extraordinary thing. So that dimension. With respect to things like the EVM, I think that there's a place and a role for technology like Ethereum, and we obviously have commercial and competitive differences, but the real enemies are not Solana versus Ethereum versus Cardano versus Bitcoin. That's like different sects of Christianity, okay? Baptism versus Methodism versus Catholicism. The real enemies here are Google and Facebook and Microsoft, these gargantuan platform companies that have billions of users, and they rely upon the fact that they're middlemen. They own your data, they kind of curate your entire experience in the web, and they get to ultimately decide your lived experience in the digital world. And when you have cryptos get big, what they do is they chip away at that, plus the BlackRocks, plus the JP Morgan Chases and the others. And the problem is we're handing the industry to those guys. The Bitcoiners cheer when BlackRock goes and sets up an ETF because it pumps their bags, not really understanding that the whole reason this industry was created was to get away from those types of guys. So that is what concerns me, is that we're starting a hyper consolidation. And if you can feed with two pizzas the actors that are controlling the liquidity and market value of the cryptocurrency industry, that's a serious concern. And really you can. Coinbase and BlackRock and Circle and Tether and a few others, they control 73% of all the economic and transactions because of stable coins on Ethereum. They control the liquidity because they get to decide who gets to be traded and who doesn't get to be traded, who's legitimate, who's not, who's in the top 10, who's not inside the top 10. And then ultimately they're also consolidating and purchasing all of the assets, and they're owning it on behalf of other people, which at any given time the government can just make arbitrary and capricious decisions about these types of things. When you have a security that represents gold, it's not like you hold the gold coin in your hand.
Nope.
And when you have a security that represents a cryptocurrency, it doesn't mean you have that Bitcoin in your hand. And they're trying to sell people that lie, the same lie that fractional reserve banking told us years ago about the nature of money. So I think the maximalists are the worst offenders of forgetting the philosophy of crypto, and paradoxically, they're ones leading to its downfall.
So ironic.
It is, but it's understandable because people like having money. People like they never bet against people's economic self-interest. We have to have a renaissance of thinking in our industry to create economic incentives to align everybody. That's what we're trying to do with Midnight, and I think I wish we had more time, but unfortunately I got to get going. But Midnight, we put a lot of deep soul searching and thought into how do we bring people together instead of apart. I know at times I can be a divisive figure, but I hope people listening to me in this interview can think for themselves. And
I don't think you are.
And not what a podcaster says or what a book is written about. I just try to be honest and forthright with people. And going back to my mother, as we talked about, I fight for the underdog and I fight against injustices. It is fundamentally unjust to call the people we disagree with criminals.
Agreed.
And any group of people that does it, they don't belong in the conversation, and you got to call them out.
Charles Hoskinson, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm looking forward to part 3, where we can dive into more of the geeky stuff. If you want to check out part 1 in audio format, I'll put it in the description. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, man.
You're so great.
Cheers.